Dogman encounter stories. It was a monster. I want to see a Dogman myself.
Welcome to Scary Stories, the channel that tells you scary stories.
Welcome to Scary Stories NYC. My late friend John A. Keel used to say that paranormal and cryptozoological encounters seemed more likely to occur on Wednesdays and on the 24th of the month. This month, Wednesday happens to fall on the 23rd, but that won't stop us from sharing two different Dogman encounter stories, both of which reportedly occurred on Wednesdays. The old dude comes back later in the show with a Hump Day Hellhound story, but first, here's Henry Lee Dogman with an allegedly true encounter we like to call Wednesday Werewolf, as told to and read by Peter Bernard. When I was a kid, I used to see a werewolf out of my bedroom window at night sometimes. It was only in the summer, and only when I was staying at my grandpa's house, which was the house my mom grew up in. The northern-facing windows in my bedroom there overlooked a dirt path leading to an old covered bridge. The bridge ran over a narrow but very fast-running river that I was warned never to play around. I was told the water could pull a fully grown man away with it, so I was told to respect its power and to never go there except with my grandfather. The scene outside my bedroom window with the river and the covered bridge and the dirt road was extremely old-fashioned, and I always felt like I was looking out onto some past time. It was a lot of fun to stay there around Christmas time, especially if it had snowed. One of the neighbors would drive a big sleigh down the dirt path, jangling the jingle bells to let us all know he was coming, with food and drink and presents for everyone. It was a nice, quiet neighborhood in the country that the interstate had bypassed, so it stayed quiet no matter what happened everywhere else. My parents lived in the suburbs near the city, which had sort of the worst aspects of each, but visiting Grandpa meant being in a peaceful, serene, almost magical location. Except on Wednesday nights, that is. On Wednesday nights, I would sometimes see a werewolf out of my window. Sometimes it would happen early in the evening, around dusk, as the sun was setting. Other times it would happen at 3 a.m. when I got up to get a drink of water. I didn't see him every week, but when I did see him, it was a Wednesday. Now let me tell you what I saw. It was a wolf more than a dog, and it was a large one. I got the impression it was gray, but other times I felt as though it were brown. It would only ever show up in dark areas and at night, so I could never be 100% sure. It looked like a wide-shouldered man, but with tall ears. The first time it caught my eye, I at first thought I was seeing someone in a Batman costume running around through the woods. That was a little frightening, so I waited to see if I could see it again. When I did, I saw it emerging from the other side of the covered wooden bridge, heading away from us, and quickly disappearing off the path into the woods. It was not wearing a cape. In fact, it wasn't wearing anything at all. I thought it was a guy in a gorilla costume or a Bigfoot costume, but its head was much more like that of a wolf. I wondered why someone would wear a costume like that, but I didn't mention it to my grandfather. The next time I saw it was 1 week later when I was taking out the trash. I saw it walk right down the center of the dirt path. It acted as though it were in a hurry and kept looking behind it, as though it were trying to escape someone or something that was chasing it. This time it definitely looked gray, and it moved so fast that I was thinking I could almost see through it. That was the last time I ever waited till after dark to take out the garbage at my grandpa's house. That was also the last time I was outside for any reason at all out there on a Wednesday night. Although, to be honest, I didn't actually put the Wednesday night part of the puzzle together until the following week, when I again saw the creature outside one of the windows in the house. This time, it was just before we were going to eat dinner, and I was out in the TV area cleaning up some video games I had left lying around. The creature was sitting on top of the wooden bridge, on the roof of it. It was facing away from me, so I don't know if it was doing anything else other than sitting, but there it was. My heart raced as I wanted to call my grandfather over, but I was really scared of the idea of telling him about it. On the one hand, he might punish me for lying or making up stories if it was gone by the time he looked, and on the other hand, if he saw it and it got him scared, then I would be a lot more frightened than I already was. I don't know if that makes sense. It's sort of the magical way a kid thinks. If I never get an adult to tell me this is real, I can keep acting like it doesn't matter that there's a large, mythical, man-eating beast sitting around outside the house every week. Every week. It did seem like every week. That's when I checked the calendar and realized it had always been Wednesday when I'd see the werewolf. I thought they were cyclical around the full moon, not around the weekly calendar. But maybe werewolves updated themselves to fit into the modern world. What did I know? All I knew was that I had seen the creature 3 times, and it had always been a Wednesday. So the next Wednesday, I was on the lookout for the thing all day, starting well before sundown. I tried not to let my uncle notice what I was doing. After dinner, when I hadn't seen him, I asked if I could go to my room and play video games. I really went up there and stared out my window, waiting for the werewolf to come. At one point, I almost freaked out because I thought I saw a Sasquatch, but it was just the son of one of the neighbors wearing a brown hoodie. He was home from the Marines. I think that's what the story was. So I watched out my window, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. My grandfather came upstairs to put me to bed, and after he left, I went right back to that window. When I woke up in the morning, I was draped on the window, drooling on myself. When I straightened out, I realized I'd given myself a neck pain from sleeping in a stupid position. This werewolf had literally become a pain in my neck. I didn't see the creature the week after, and that meant I had 2 Wednesdays left before returning to my parents in the boring suburbs with no werewolves at all and school every day. I started trying to stay up later each night and see how late Grandpa would let me sleep each morning. I wanted to become completely nocturnal, reasoning that it would give me a better chance to see the monster. Grandpa was not interested in letting me sleep past 9 a.m. though, so my plan lasted exactly 1 day. Nevertheless, I snuck off to take naps on Wednesday this next week, hoping it would give me extra stamina to stay up later and see the monster. I also snuck a bag of brown sugar from the pantry. It was the only sugary thing he had in there, and I figured it would help keep me awake. I would hold the bag up in the air and pour it into my mouth, then let it dissolve. Brown sugar. So I stayed up till dawn that time, and I finished half the sugar, but I didn't see anything strange, and I was a mess the next day. Grandpa wanted to bring me to the town doctor, but I just said if I could sleep, it would be a one-day flu. My last Wednesday out there, I was kind of sad and decided not to even try to see the creature. So, of course, that's when I got the most close-up sighting of all. The way it went down was this. I woke up at 2:30 or 3 or sometime like that in the middle of the night, and I went downstairs to get something to eat. I had never done that before. I had never gone downstairs for food in the middle of the night at my grandfather's place. I don't remember what I got out of the refrigerator, but I pulled something out, and I remember eating it and walking over to one of the large windows. Then I pulled the shades to look out, and as I did, I revealed an immense, as in 7 foot tall or taller, hairy, dog-headed man standing directly outside the window, staring back into the room. I panicked and ducked down behind the couch, then peeked out. It was still standing there, still staring directly forward. It hadn't seemed to have noticed me at all, and as I watched it standing there, I realized I could see through it. I could see a light shining right through its shoulder. This was an incredibly tall entity or creature, and I wondered if it might be a different one than the ones I had seen before. This one was gray and white, and its eyes shone a bright yellowy orange. I could see it had some pretty ferocious looking fangs, although it was not growling or looking angry at the moment I was observing it. The creature had spots of fur missing on its belly, as though it had been suffering a rash or maybe a vermin infestation. It looked very much like a real creature. The expressions on its face, while unreadable, were unique and not those that would be made with a mask or by an unthinking beast. Whatever this was, it both seemed biologically alive, and yet I could also see right through it. It's hard to even describe, and there's nothing I can compare it to that I can think of. Nothing at all. I ran up to my bedroom to get a greater distance between me and the monster. Then I looked out of my window down at where it was. Nothing was there anymore. So it had saved the best appearance of all for my last Wednesday that year. The creature didn't put in any appearances at all the next summer or the one following. I had gotten a theory that it was only migrating through the area that one summer, and it was probably roaming an entirely different place by now. But then I got a huge surprise a few years after, when I was a teenager. I don't remember if I was 15, 16, 17. It was in that range. I had pretty much chalked up my childhood Dogman sightings to imagination and vivid dreams. Then, one night, all that changed, and I finally had to confront my grandfather about the entire subject. It was a Wednesday night, of course. I was watching something on TV in the living room, and my grandfather was in his room reading a book. There was suddenly a lot of shouting outside, so I got up to look at what was going on. I saw nothing out of the ordinary, but I could hear the sounds of angry people shouting things. Then I saw it. The Dogman, or werewolf. It looked exactly as I had seen it when I was a kid, taking the garbage out that night. It ran down the road, toward the house, toward the covered wooden bridge. It looked over its shoulder, but I saw nothing behind it. The creature ran right past our house, down the road, and ran into the covered bridge. Then the sounds of shouting dissipated and disappeared, and I could see the wolf creature emerging from the far end of the bridge and running off into the woods on the other side. I ran and got my grandfather and told him what I saw. I was no longer afraid of the repercussions, and this time I was certain about what I had seen and heard. Grandpa looked amazed, but told me he wasn't surprised to hear this. He told me he had seen it too. I poured out all the stories I've just told you, informing him that every time I had witnessed the creature, including sometimes being able to see through it. He just nodded his head as though that weren't such a strange thing. Then he told me to sit down so he could tell me a story from his childhood. Grandpa, like my mother, had been born in that very house. When he was 5 years old, there was a big hubbub outside the house as the parents in the neighborhood, including his own father, had cornered and chased an actual werewolf down that very street. He said he had watched the entire scene from his bedroom window. That's the same room which I now sleep in. We saw the monster from the same window. Grandpa described what I had already seen play out more than once. The monster ran on its hind legs like a man, but it had a wolf's head and wore no clothes. It ran in a nervous manner, looking over its shoulder repeatedly. Only in Grandpa's version, there really were people chasing the creature, and they had weapons and torches. The creature climbed on top of the bridge and roared back down at the crowd. They threw things at it, according to Grandpa, who could watch the entire scene from his window. The creature caught some of the things, like he caught a rock. Then he threw it right back at the person who had thrown it at him. An animal couldn't do that. The thing clearly had intelligence. But what it didn't have was luck, as it slipped off of the roof and plunged into the fast-moving river, being washed away too quickly for the body to be recovered. Grandpa said they never found the remains, and they never discovered who the werewolf was for sure. But the town judge disappeared the same night as the Wolfman, and his widow moved away from town due to all the nasty gossip about her missing husband. My grandfather had seen the ghost of the werewolf many times since then. It would always appear on a Wednesday, which was the day when it died. It would play out like a movie, but in 3D. The creature never seemed to see him, as though it were a residual haunting. But unlike a residual haunting, the creature would behave a little bit differently each time it appeared. I told him about the time the creature seemed to be looking into the house, but didn't react to anything happening inside there. Grandpa had never seen the creature come that close, but it supported his argument that the scenario was ever changing. It was as though the situation would replay itself, but the poor creature would have to relive it each time as though it were a new thing. It would have to try to find a way to survive. Maybe when I saw it running through the bridge and into the woods, maybe those were the times when the scenario played out and the creature escaped the townspeople. Maybe this was all some kind of a limbo where the Dogman's death is replayed over and over again. If life can be compared to a video game, as some scientists think it can be, then maybe someone just really likes that part of this video game we call Planet Earth. Maybe they're just simulating that one scene over and over again. As he was telling me all these stories, we began to hear a low, moaning howl off in the woods. It was a solitary howl, and no other creatures joined in with it. If that was a dog or a wolf, it was a dog or a wolf with a great deal of lung capacity. The howling went on for so long, I couldn't even hold my breath as long as one of those screams. It was terrifying. I suggested we leave. Grandpa laughed and reminded me that we'd be safer inside than out in the dark, even if we were driving. Besides, he told me, those might only be the howls of a ghost. I agreed that it might be, but what if it was a real creature, a descendant of the one who fell off the bridge, or maybe a cousin or something? If they lived in this area in the 1940s, that's not so long ago that they might not still be living in the area up until the 21st century. Maybe some of the creatures I saw weren't ghosts. Sometimes they seemed more brown than gray after all. Maybe both kinds of dogmen were haunting the area, living ones and dead ones. My grandfather and I, over the years, discussed setting up trap cameras to try to get pictures or video of the thing. We set up 3 still cameras, and now we have a motion-activated video camera as well. Of course, the werewolf has never appeared again since any of this equipment was set up. Maybe the glitch in the game got corrected, or maybe whoever was replaying that scenario got bored and moved on to the Death of Bigfoot scene from whichever Grand Theft Auto version that was. In any case, Grandpa and I keep the cameras set up and check them periodically. It's something to talk about, and you never know when they might actually get a photo or a video of something that might change the entire worldview of a whole bunch of people.
Do you have a scary story you want us to read on the show? Just call our voicemail hotline, 804-LIST-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. And now for something completely scary.
Hump Day Dogman, as told to and read by Peter Bernard. When I was in my first and second year of college back 10 or 11 years ago, I used to come home for the summers and work a full-time day job at a store in town. My younger brother would work in the same store, but only 3 days a week. 2 of them were days I worked there also, and his third day came on my second day off. I got Mondays and Tuesdays off. My mother got a new car and let us use her old one to drive to work each day. So, one week my brother came home on a Tuesday night all shaken up. He said he didn't want to talk about it and went to bed early, which was very unlike him. The next morning was Wednesday, one of the days we both worked at the store together. I should say there was a road we would drive down each morning that had a speed bump on it. I forget why. Maybe there were kids on that block or something. Anyway, that morning I slowed down to go over the speed bump, and then on the next block, my brother, let's call him Cal because he was a big Cal Ripken Jr. fan, he pointed out these bushes next to a creepy-looking patch of woods and he said, "That's where I saw the monster last night." I laughed so hard I almost choked. I was visualizing the Loch Ness monster in those bushes and it made me laugh. He said it wasn't funny, and it wasn't a lake monster, it was a land monster. So now I was picturing Boris Karloff as the Frankenstein monster, so it wasn't any less funny. Cal was losing his temper with me and told me to forget about it. I tried to apologize to him at lunch, but it only made him more annoyed about it. We worked 12 to 8 shifts, and usually didn't get started toward home till 8:30 or 9, so it would be pretty dark on the way home. As we got a block away from the speed bump, Cal once again pointed to the place he said he had seen a monster. Only this time, he pointed in a much more excited way and insisted he was once again seeing the monster with his own eyes. I looked, but I only saw bushes. However, I was driving and I couldn't really stare. Cal told me to speed up, but I reminded him that the speed bump was on the next block. He said it wasn't chasing us, and I pretended to be relieved. By that point, I was wondering if he had lost his mind, so I was just humoring him. So the night after, or 2 nights after, I remember this is happening on a weekend, so it was probably Friday or Saturday night. I was driving back from the store, alone in the dark. As I approached the spot my brother had pointed out to me twice, I slowed the car down and gave those bushes a good look. To my surprise, there definitely was something there. I reached into my glove compartment and got out the flashlight, which was a big rectangular block thing and pretty powerful. I got out of the car and shone the light into the bushes. I got eye shine back, yellowish orange eye shine. I immediately relaxed because it reminded me of raccoon eyes reflecting the light back, and I figured that must be what it was. I was almost going to look away and get back in the car when I got the surprise of 10 lifetimes. That thing in the bushes stood up. It was Bigfoot, or so I thought. It was a very tall humanoid covered in dark hair or fur like a gorilla or a chimp. I was raising my flashlight to view its head when it turned and ran into the forest. Now, this next part might not make sense to anyone from 2018, but the me in this story came from the 90s. I had watched TV shows about Bigfoot since I was a kid, and one of the things I wanted most of all was to get to see a Sasquatch. Now, most people might have been happy with that one glimpse I got, and they might have gotten right back in their car and driven home to celebrate. Not me, though. I ran after the creature I thought was a Bigfoot, down a dirt path into the forest. I kept him in my sights, but he kept putting more distance between us. I got the flashlight on his back a couple of times, and I thought it was the shadows creating an optical illusion, but it looked like this Bigfoot had a tail. I ran until I was exhausted, then I caught my breath, leaning on my knees. By the time I had strength to continue, the creature was long gone. Still curious, though, I went further into the woods. Very soon, I walked into the most terrible odor I had ever smelled. This made me think I must be getting close because Bigfoot is supposed to smell very bad. So now I sped up again and followed my nose, basically. It always knows, as the old TV commercial used to say back then. I came upon an indentation in the turf and discovered the source of the horrible odor, which was not Bigfoot at all. It was For lack of a better word, a kill pit. This was a 30-foot wide, roughly circular pit in the ground where some predator had been having dinner for some time. My stomach and my heart dropped. I'd better get out of there if I didn't want to be next on the menu. I ran back to the car, and as I did so, I heard what must have been the beast in question running behind me. If it wasn't a Bigfoot, it was a bear or something, and I was in trouble. I never ran so fast in my life, yet I could hear whatever it was gaining on me. I got an ache in my side because I wasn't used to running that much, so my running was slowed down. I could see the car out on the street now, and I practically willed myself the rest of the way. As I slammed the door and entered the relative safety of the car interior, I finally saw what was chasing me. It was not Bigfoot. It was not a bear either. My brother was right. It was a monster. It was a monster like out of a horror movie. It had hands that no real animal should ever have. Those were monster claws. They looked like they could tear anything apart. The thing stood like a man and seemed very athletic and agile, but was not a man. It was entirely covered in hair. I don't remember if it had any color, but I remember it was dark. It had a mouth that was long like a dog's, but it roared, and it sounded more like a feline mixed with a human or primate. The ears were tall, and on the top of its head like Anubis. But this was not Anubis. It was shaggier than a jackal. It wasn't really exactly like any kind of animal I had ever seen before. Its back legs, for instance, looked like a goat's legs or a deer's legs. There are no animals that are supposed to look like that. Maybe there are demons that match that description, but nothing natural. It slammed into the passenger seat window as I hit the gas, and I drove off as quickly as I could. At the last second, I remembered the speed bump, and I tried to slow down, but the car hit the bump pretty hard, and I could hear something fall out of the engine onto the pavement. The car sputtered to a stop, and I grabbed that flashlight, and I got out, and I ran. Now I was running through a residential neighborhood, so I wondered if the Dogman would dare to follow me here, or if he had retreated to the woods. I was too frightened to look back, though, until I had reached the next street light. I stared behind me, and I didn't see anything at first, but then I saw it. It was running through front yards and hiding from the light wherever possible. Its stealth was costing it speed, and was probably the only reason I had evaded it so far. I needed to do the opposite. I needed to stay in the light and run as fast as I could. And so, that's what I did. For block after block after block. There was no traffic that night, and I didn't pass a single person out walking for any reason. I wondered if nobody in this neighborhood ever walked their dog, but then I realized I was the only one out tonight with a dog. Lucky me. I made it home, but I hadn't shaken the creature. I saw it until I entered my block, and then I couldn't see it anymore, but I knew it was still there. It had deliberately let me get away because it wanted to know where I lived. That was incredibly unnerving to me, but the thing is, we lived on a block where all the houses are literally wall to wall with each other. It almost makes the houses into apartments in a way because you could hear the music that your neighbor was playing even if they weren't really playing it all that loud. We technically did have a backyard, but we never used it. I didn't go for walks at night very often, so I didn't know what value it would be to the wolf thing to know where I lived. I couldn't see how it could use that information to hurt me. I went inside, and I wanted to take a shower since I was sweaty and filthy from running home. I laid down on my bed for a second, and my brother came in to ask if I was all right and where the car was. I told him that the monster crashed the car into the speed bump or something, and then I passed out. He let me sleep and went out looking for the car with my father. I woke up around 2 or 3 a.m. and my brother was still up watching TV. He told me that he and Dad got the car back, but it was going to have to go in for repairs in the morning. My father was an expert at putting a car back together with rubber bands and masking tape, but it was only ever a temporary repair. It should work long enough to get it into the shop. He also told me that he saw the monster again, but not at the speed bump. I asked him what he meant, and he said that as he and Dad drove to the place where I had my accident, Cal saw the monster trailing after them. It was right across the street from our house when they got in the car, and it followed them for maybe 5 or 6 blocks, keeping to the shadows as I had seen it do, before Cal said he suddenly couldn't see it anymore. The entire time our father was fixing the car, Cal was paranoid and looking around. He didn't see the creature anywhere again for the rest of the night. It seemed to have lost interest and found something else to do. Then Cal leaned in and asked me if I was willing to keep a secret. I said sure. He said he meant really keep a secret. I told him if he didn't tell me the secret, I was gonna punch him in the shoulder. So he told me with great solemnity that he saw the face of the monster. With mock solemnity, I asked him what the monster looked like. He told me that the monster was a humanoid camel with fangs. Again, I burst out laughing, so Cal turned off the TV and went to bed. I was still exhausted, so I didn't stop him. So, I never saw the monster again, but in my junior year at college, when I went away with my first serious girlfriend to Florida instead of going home for the summer, my brother Cal saw that monster one last time. He was driving down that same road back from the same job at night one night. Actually, I think he got a job that summer in a different store, but it was in the same shopping mall, so it was the same drive home either way. As he drove past the place where he originally saw the monster the first time, which is the same place as where I chased it into the woods, he was stunned to actually see eye shine. Just like when I shined the flashlight on it that night, the thing stood up, and my brother insisted it had to be 8 feet tall if it was an inch. It was dark and hairy, and he said it had the face of a dark camel with pointed ears. So I think he was describing the same Dogman that I saw. He floored the gas, then immediately remembered the mess I had made that night by crashing into the speed bump. he was able to slow down enough to get past the obstacle without anything going wrong at all. Unless you consider letting the Dogman catch up with you something wrong. I would. My brother did too. He told me he sped home through the neighborhoods, deathly afraid someone would jump out on the street in front of him before he had time to stop. My brother is not a speedy driver, so I know this must have been terrifying for him. Back then, he would shake all over when he had to drive on the highway, and would pass the responsibility off to anyone else he possibly could. So, speeding through a residential neighborhood must have made him more than nervous. I asked him how long it took to get away from the Dogman, and he told me he didn't. That confused me, so I asked him to explain. He said that Dogman kept pace with him on its hind legs until he got up around 35 or 40 miles an hour. At that point, he pulled ahead by maybe 10 feet before the creature dropped to all fours and ran as gracefully as a greyhound. Then it was back up to the passenger seat window, keeping pace with the car all the way up to 60 miles per hour. Just as had happened when I ran home away from the monster that night, Cal lost sight of it just before turning onto our family's block. Just like me, he sensed it was still out there somewhere, watching him. But all he cared about was getting back inside, locking the door, and taking a shower. That was the last time anyone in our family saw the Dogman. It was nasty looking. It seemed vicious, but it never actually hurt any of us. Maybe it just liked to chase people and chase cars. Some dogs like doing those things. Maybe it didn't mean any harm at all. All I know is, I'm glad my family moved out of that part of the country, and I really never, ever want to see a Dogman again for the rest of my life. That goes for Bigfoot too, and Nessie, and UFOs, and any other kind of creepy crawly you can think of. Any and all of the monsters that I thought I wanted to see when I was a kid, these days, I pray to never, ever encounter them. And if you want to know why, then don't ask me. Instead, you should ask the Hump Day Dogman.
I'd like to take a moment to say that if you have a scary story you'd like to tell us here, you can write Peter at peterbernard.com, or you can call our new Scary Stories hotline number and leave it to us in the form of a voicemail message. It's easy to remember. 804-LESCARY. That's 804-LESCARY, or 804-537-2279.
My grandparents saw a Dogman, as told to and read by Peter Bernard. I am a college senior, and I love all the channels on YouTube which have Dogman stories on them. I want to see a Dogman myself, even though I also find the idea terrifying. I admit I don't want to get hurt or anything. I'm not a daredevil. I think if I did see a Dogman, I might faint. I don't go out looking for them because I know that most people who see them report back that they are evil and possibly demonic. If I ever do see the creature, it's going to be completely by chance. But still, a guy can dream. So I was telling all this to my grandfather, who's a fairly cool guy actually. Like, there's that joke about Grandpa Simpson going on about his childhood and sounding like a crazy old dude. But when my grandfather tells me about his youth, it's all stories about Jimi Hendrix and Harry Nilsson and people like that. Anyway, like I was saying, I told my grandpa that I wished I could see a dogman, and he started telling me that he didn't know what a dogman was, but he once saw a dog that walked upright like a man. I got really excited and I was like, Grandpa, that's exactly what a dogman is. And I begged him to tell me the story. To my surprise, this was not a story from a long time ago. It was from last autumn in 2017. He and Grandma were driving in the Catskills in their old station wagon that I don't think they'll ever sell. They were either coming back from or going up to see some show. They like to stay in a hotel up in the mountains and go to see live entertainment. So anyway, they got a flat tire and they called for AAA and they waited. Grandpa has this thing where he doesn't feel there are any coincidences. So when he gets stuck anywhere or anytime, he figures there's a reason for it. Like, if he just misses the walk sign and has to wait at a street corner, he looks around for some meaning in the moment. Why am I stuck right here, right now, for the next full minute? That's Grandpa. He says he's not religious, but to me, that is a show of great faith in the universe on his part, and it's one of the things about him that I think are cool. Grandma, on the other hand, rolls her eyes each time he gets like that and calls him insulting nicknames, like the Baba Yabba Dabba Doo and stuff like that. So Grandpa gets these binoculars he carries with him in his glove compartment out, and Grandma rolls her eyes as Grandpa scans their location 360 degrees, looking for the meaning of this flat tire. Then, Grandpa saw something pretty meaningful. He pulled down the binoculars and looked with his bare eyes. There it was. He pointed to it and asked Grandma if she saw what he saw. Grandma stopped rolling her eyes and joined Grandpa in stunned amazement. There, about 100 to 150 feet down the road, they could see a dog. A really, really big dog walking across the highway on its hind legs. I have since asked Grandma about this, and she says she saw this thing too, but she claims she never rolls her eyes at her husband. So, Grandpa's description was that it looked like the world's largest black terrier. That didn't sound very frightening to me, but he said it scared the two of them all right. It was like a prehistoric, bipedal terrier with massive muscles. It looked like it could walk off with a medium-sized cow, according to Grandma, who is by far the more restrained of the two of them. Now, it was walking from their right to their left and away from them. Neither of them are sure if the creature saw them or not, but they think most likely it hadn't noticed them parked off on the side of the highway, behind it and to its left. They watched as this thing that Grandma described as looking like the Hulk dressed as a furry walked away from them and into the woods. Then the AAA lady showed up and Grandpa got out to guard her against bears, quote-unquote, while she changed their tire. Neither of them told her about the immense walking dog, since they didn't want to seem like they had overdosed on their meds. And that's about it, as far as they can recall. They drove on soon afterward, and they haven't seen anything else strange since then. And that's the story of the time my grandparents saw a dogman. Since I'm here, I may as well read you this letter we received from a listener about a terrifying creature that's been haunting him. Let's call the story The Alien in My Backyard. backyard. Dear Scary Stories, I like your channel a lot, and I've been thinking of sending you my story for some time. I'm not sure if you're going to be interested though, because it's not a story about the Dogman. It's a story about those aliens that I see outside my window at night. I'm calling them aliens because that's kind of what they look like, but I don't actually know where they are from. And I'll explain in a while why I have a sneaking suspicion they may be from right here. If they are from another planet, I think they've been stationed here probably for longer than we people have even existed. I've seen documentaries that say the most ancient religions and cultures all told stories of alien gods who created the human race. If they are aliens, then I suppose we are too, if we were seated here by them. I don't know if the strange person I see is related to those old stories or not, though. Maybe this is a different thing altogether. Let me just explain what I see. I call him the starer because that's what he does. He stares into the house at me, always at night. The first time I noticed it, it was hiding in the bushes in my backyard. It was a figure, and I probably wouldn't have even seen it there, except that its skin was so pale. I noticed something very light-colored that nearly seemed to be glowing in the dark. It was out of my hall window one night. I was cleaning up the snacks and drinks that I had accumulated in the living room, and when I passed the hall window toward the kitchen, something moved outside. I tried to see better what it was, but all I could be certain of is that something very light-colored seemed to be hiding in those bushes. I called the police and told them I had a prowler, and the woman stayed on the phone with me until the squad cars showed up. I had been watching the thing behind the bush for the entire time and still didn't understand what I was looking at. When the police arrived, I left the window and went to the front door to greet them. There was only one officer there, though, and he explained that his partner had already gone around back to get to the prowler. Only a few minutes later, while we were still talking, his partner came back around to the front and announced that there was nobody in my backyard. I was stunned. I ran to the hall window in the back of the house, and sure enough, there was no longer anyone behind that bush. I apologized to the officers, and they said they were going to drive around the neighborhood for a while to see if they could figure out where he had gone to. I told them that they couldn't miss him. He seemed to be wearing clothes that were very brightly light-colored, mostly white, but with a bluish tinge to it. They left in a friendly way, and I hoped that would be the end of that. But it wasn't. And the next time, the cops weren't as nice. In fact, they weren't nice to me at all. They treated me like I was some kind of a nut job. What happened that second time was that I saw a figure colored that same white running back and forth between two trees out in my backyard, just over and over, apparently for no reason. And it had an odd way of walking, which resembled skipping almost. This utterly creeped me out, and I felt like that was his purpose. I was pretty certain this was going to turn out to be one of those nut jobs in clown makeup deliberately trying to frighten people. Well, if that was his aim, he was doing a good job. So, once again, when the police showed up, there was nobody there in my backyard. It was stupid of me to have left the window again. I never should have gone to the front door. Obviously, the prowler had some means of quick escape. If only I had stayed at the window, then I could have seen where he went to. So now, my third encounter with the creature was far more terrifying than the first two. This time, I saw it in my backyard, but it was no longer trying to hide itself in any way. There it was, standing straight up against the back fence in my yard. He seemed to be wearing clothes that were skin tight. Both his flesh and suit were that same blue-tinged white. I had only seen it for a second or two each time before in profile, but this time he just stood. He, or it, was a humanoid. But if that was actually a human, he or she was wearing one heck of a costume. It looked like an alien, like the classic kind of alien you see on TV. It was short, probably over 4 feet, but under 5. Its head was very large for its body. If that were someone in a costume, they must have been young. The eyes were huge and black. It reminded me of a bug's eyes, sort of. It had a tiny nose and mouth, which I never saw it open. It never attempted to communicate with me by talking or by mental telepathy like in those alien stories. It just stood perfectly still, staring at me. This time, when I called the police, the lady seemed dubious, and she didn't even stay on the line with me until the cops arrived. In fact, the cops never arrived. They must have put me on the crank list. Whatever happened this time, I was going to have to get through it entirely by myself. I stood in my house, staring at a space alien in my backyard, who stared back at me. And then the thing ran directly at my window, much faster than I would have expected it to be able to. It was racing toward me, making a kind of high-pitched whining noise. I completely panicked and ran to my bedroom, locking myself in. From downstairs, I could hear the alien-looking creature smashing through my window and invading the place. I could hear him throwing chairs and appliances around, smashing all my coffee mugs and plates, and destroying my television set. I stayed up in my room, unable to move, or even to think. Eventually, the noises from downstairs ceased, but I was too afraid to leave my room until the sun came back up. In the morning, I went downstairs and found nothing out of place. The window I heard the alien break in through was still unbroken. All my plates, mugs, and glasses were fine. I turned on the TV expecting it to be broken, but once again it was fine. I have no explanation of how that creature created all that noise without breaking a single thing. I definitely, at that point, did not think I was dealing with intelligent life from another universe. I was dealing with an entity whose main objective seemed to be to frighten me. Why would an astronaut from another world come here to jump out at me and go boo? So, the most recent time I saw the thing, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of scratching and rustling, as though there were a mouse or a rat in my bedroom. I sat up in bed and turned on the light, and there, just past the foot of my bed, stood the creature. It was in my home, in my own bedroom. I screamed. I'd never been so scared in my life. The thing turned to look at me. Then, it just sort of became invisible. It looked a bit liquid at first, as though it were turning into a man made of clear water. Then, it disappeared altogether. I know it was still there, though, because I could hear it. It had gone back to moving my stuff around on my shelves. I ran out of the room and went to sleep with a friend of mine who lives in the neighborhood. Now I've signed a lease on a new apartment and I'm set to move in 3 days. Even so, I won't sleep in that house anymore. I'm staying in a hotel until moving day. I never want to see that alien or goblin or whatever it is again. And I absolutely can't wait to get out of this place and to never come back to the alien in my backyard.
Come back for more scary stories.